Hello, everyone. I am Zac Greenberg, co-founder of Musicians for Health and your host of Brain Food. Today, we are honored to have with us Dr. Doug Hawley. Doug, could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm a hematologist oncologist. I did all my training at UC and then stayed on as faculty there after that for a short period of time. But a guy named Dick Levy was sort of constantly after me to join him and start a practice, which I initially refused. But he then got two people from Duke and from NCI to join him, and at that point I said, well, I'm gonna do that also. So I left UC and helped start that practice, which eventually became OHC, which expanded to 50 or 60 physicians and became well known not just locally but nationally as well, as a leader in oncology research and some other things. And but the politics got a little bit unruly by the time we got to that many physicians, as you might imagine. And I was stuck in a situation where I was working 16 or 18 hours a day with no prospect of change, which I didn't really mind, but it was, I had a family and more hobbies than sense, one of which is music, which we'll be obviously talking about. And so I wasn't really having time for all that. And I was being recruited by UC for to take the position of head of hematology oncology at the VA, and plus some work at UC too. And so, just to be real clear, I was never, burnt out by that schedule. In fact, burnout is a term that's battered around a lot by physicians. Describe a state where you either overwork or these days more often, distress about the learning curve of medical technology, and especially the electronic medical record causes physicians to get distressed and no longer interested in practicing and no longer interested in their patients. And obviously the patients suffer, and it's not a good thing. So that wasn't me at all. I never had any of that. In fact, I kind of, liked working those hours. In fact, I probably a lot of those hours were, spent doing extra stuff. I was great at the electronic medical records, and made a little DVD to show fellows and residents how to do little tricks and things like that. So I was all into that stuff, and always, almost had another hobby of reading about medicine to try to keep up with, what's going on. And I love my practice. Hemonc is the most exciting field in the world. It's got new things all the time. It's changing constantly. It's very exciting. It's constantly going through new phases. Right now, a new phase and looking at targeted therapy and immunotherapy as opposed to chemotherapy. So it's a very exciting time. And plus the relationship that you have with patients in hematology oncology is really special. And I think that was, with me, especially the case. And I was very, very close to my patients and always convinced that the relationship had a lot to do with not just the patient's quality of life, but even their survival. It's been a little hard to prove, but we know that things that we can't explain really affect patients' survival in cancer. Things like whether you're married or have a religion or have a dog or have hospice explained to you before treatment, things that really don't make any sense why it would help survival. And I think definitely the patient relationship with the physician can be very therapeutic and can be one of those things. And so I was, very much into that. And as a result, was very close to my patients. So the thought of leaving was really difficult. But, on the other hand, I love teaching. I had some sort of special things with the VA. My great uncle was General Paul Hawley, who was the first medical chief of the VA nationally, and actually established the relationship of the VA hospitals overall to universities as a way of handling the hundreds of thousands of veterans coming home from World War II and improve their quality of care. So he's kind of responsible for the VA today's role in medical education. Right now, about 70% of physicians in this country have had some of their training done at a VA hospital. So it's a very important teaching institution too. And so that was all pretty attractive to me. But kind of the clinker or the kinker was one night I was driving home at quarter of 1 a.m. For the second night in a row, and trying to think about how quickly I could eat my dinner so I could get to bed and wake up by 4:15 for the next day.
Yeah.
And I suddenly hit the curb and realized I'd fallen asleep as I was driving. And I thought, no, that's probably an omen that I ought to, seriously think about, changing this. So I did. I made the very difficult decision to leave my practice and go back to UC and take up full-time chief of HEMOC at the VA, as well as some part-time work at UC. And we made some really good changes at the VA. We, I think, established state-of-the-art practice. We did next-generation sequencing on all cancers, all advanced cancers, and expanded the role of the fellowship. We have 13 fellows who spend a good part of their training at the VA, and established a way to get new patients in within. We offered them an appointment within 24 hours, and did a lot of other good things. Did pretty much the newest and the best treatments there were, and so I think it was a generally good thing. And I was able to do teaching too. In fact, somehow teacher of the year for UC for HEMOC for two of the 4 years I was there.
Wow.
So I quit about, I hate to brag about anything, but
No, it's all no.
So I quit the VA about a year and a half ago. And my intention was just to do part-time at UC, but somehow I ended up with this domino effect of maladies that ended up with me having 6 surgeries in a year period. And then COVID came along. And I'm at ultra high risk because I have an inherited antibody deficiency. So, so I really don't, my wife and I have just kind of locked down in our house. And so I'm just doing remote, I'm going to the fellow conferences and doing I'm the associate fellowship program director, but I converted all those things to volunteer status in March. And so I'm volunteer associate professor of medicine, volunteer associate program director, and just go online to do Zoom, or actually the academic equivalent of Zoom, things with the fellowship program. Now, I guess once we get a vaccine, hopefully I'll be back physically there. So
that's one of the amazing things that has happened. So like things like this program, like Brain Food and the stuff that we've been working on too, if this had all happened 20 years ago, it would be a very different situation for us all to be able to continue being very productive and focused and trying to, push it along.
20 years ago, we would have maybe written each other and said hi. So.
And just a side note, I do want to say that the way that I know you, and I think that the family in general does, is that you were my grandfather's doctor while he was battling cancer too, and that you always went above and beyond. And we can say firsthand that, especially my grandmother has always she saw how much extra you put in and how much that really affected her partner. And it was kind of a big spark of why we started Musicians for Health in general. And so thank you for that. I can attest firsthand.
In fact, one of the things I should mention is that, I've had a number of people rotate with me. One of them was you, actually, in the office. And but I had students and residents and so forth also rotate. And one of the things that they're always amazed at is that, people kind of come in with the impression that, cancer and death and dying, this is going to be depressing. But people are always amazed at how uplifting the experience is overall.
Yeah.
And how great it is to interact with every patient all day long, and what a nice, pleasant, really uplifting experience it is.
Yeah, I've felt that 100% when I had the privilege of doing rounds for you, and which I'm sure was a little unique because I was there doing research for writing a programmatic piece, the Unexpected Journey. And so, not being medically backgrounded, it was even more interesting to, to go in and having had family members that had gone through cancer and yeah, having this conception. And it was total 180 from what I expected. There was so much energy. Of course, there were moments and there were patients, but
Right.
like
Yeah,
it was amazing to see how much joy and energy and life was just oozing out of that facility.
it was great having you for that period because I think my patients all knew that I was interested in music. And when I introduced you as somebody who was trying to work on a project where music would express the feelings and experiences of cancer, they were like, wow, let's do this,
Yeah.
all attend to it. Usually we don't have non-medical people in there, but patients love to have you in there. So it was
Yeah. And
always
we
great.
found that it's been as we've created more and more programming, we've been working on some virtual reality stuff for patients and different just going to play for them and all these different outreach options for art and it's been really amazing to see that across the board and it was great to be able to find that early on in your facilities of just that it can be definitely a little overwhelming, especially as an artist, to be like, okay, I'm going to walk into this situation now. But it only takes one or two until you realize that it's really the opposite of that. It's really a deep
If
experience.
I remember correctly, you would stay in the room when I left the room, and you'd
Yeah,
stay and talk to the patients for a
yeah,
while for that. So
yeah.
yeah, really nice. It was very nice. Really nice.
And so listening to you talk about your schedule too kind of loops us back around to some of your other background in earlier life of you being a guitar player. And the schedule, hearing about doctors, and I think about it a lot, especially different doctors, surgeons too, especially it's like very rock and roll in a way. And so yeah, I've seen your guitar collection and I've played with you, and I know that you're an outstanding player and you have a very cool history. For one of my favorite stories, if you could talk a little about opening up for Led Zeppelin.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I guess I've been pretty lucky my whole life, and having been in bands, you know, for as long as I can, remember post-pubescence, I guess. So, yeah, I got a guitar when I was 12, and started a band called the Chancellors with some friends, and we were purely a garage band. We played covers and played songs like Louie Louie and Land of a Thousand Dances at open houses and things like that. And I guess I got to be a pretty good guitarist because I was recruited into to start another band, the Black Watch, which is a little bit higher powered band. They were older guys. I didn't really know them. Some of them became lifetime musicians. We were union members. We had our own truck. We had roadies. We had a manager. We did demos. We traveled, and we got a lot of money. If you translate it into dollars today, it was amazing.
Hmm.
But and we basically did covers, but we did some originals, but we would take a song like Light My Fire, and we do like a 30-minute
Uh-huh.
psychedelic version of it. And we had a keyboard player named Dick McCauley who played Hammond B3 and could solo like Jimmy Smith, and I could improvise for hours, like indefinitely, really.
Yeah.
And so we would really get into that, but yet the whole band was really able to shift into these various different sort of psychedelic mood changes and things like that together, through the improvisation, and it was really fun. And I guess people must have liked it because we had a lot of jobs, and among that, we traveled to New York twice, and during one of those, we opened for a fledgling Led Zeppelin who was just converting from the New Yardbirds, I think, and at the time we thought the biggest thing we did that trip was play at the Electric Circus
Oh,
uh,
cool. Very
and cut
cool.
some tapes. But in retrospect, obviously that was probably the biggest thing. So they
Yeah.
want obviously to become one of the biggest hard rock, heavy metal groups and most influential rock groups in history.
Yeah. Yeah. In
And,
New York in that time,
so,
in New York, that must have been such an interesting, especially coming from Cincinnati. You were in Cincinnati at the time, correct?
well,
Living?
yeah, I live in Cincinnati, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Um, which was also, I mean, was King Records still around at that point, or had
Yes,
they?
they were. They were. I didn't know much about them at the time, but I do now. So,
Yeah. And
uh,
so there was a very good scene going on in Cincinnati, but New York at that time was, I mean, that was a prime time for the city. So it must have been being able to see those guys and, it was some energy going on for sure.
it was great. So yeah, we also played with Steppenwolf for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And I've saved a poster that has the Lemon Pipers opening for us. Of course, they went on to have a #1 record in Green Tambourine, but
Yeah.
so we were small time, big time. We never had we cut a lot of demos, but we never actually released a recording, unfortunately. And
Mm.
as far as I know, there's no tapes of this in existence
Yeah.
anymore. So that all kind of ended up fairly quickly and in a way not so great for me. I had actually dropped out of high school and got in trouble with the law, with the police. And there was a young female detective who took an interest in me and I guess thought she saw something worthwhile saving and made this deal with my parents that if they would ship me off to a boarding school out of the state, that I wouldn't be prosecuted. And so I got shipped off to Cheshire, Connecticut, stayed there for 3 months, and the band kind of waited for me. In fact, we met in New York. I went straight from there to New York City for our second trip there,
Uh-huh.
but somewhere right around that same time, they were obviously mad at me for being gone, and we had a lead singer who had been the most recent addition to the group that he and I didn't really get along, and the focus of the band had become more vocal and less improvised
Hmm.
at that point. And I guess I was kind of more interested in a hippie lifestyle,
Yeah.
at the time. And so we kind of made a mutual decision to part. And so, in other words, I quit and they fired me.
Yeah.
So I stayed in New York for about another 3 months, just kind of wandering around, and then came back to Cincinnati. One of the more interesting things from that related to that is that 30 years later, when my daughter was applying to nursing schools, that same female detective had become a dean of one of the nursing schools, and
Oh, well.
we met up and somehow after a couple of minutes realized who each other was, and we were both really in tears. I was like her first big success story of her career was her save.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It
That's
was a pretty neat time. So
serendipitous. And it's
very, 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 yes. Mhm.
and at the beginning you'd mentioned, the politics of in the medical field. And right now you're just kind of touching a little on how deep, especially in those days, the politics in the music industry were too, because now record deals, record industry, it's a little less of a thing. It's kind of fizzled out. But in those days, I mean, there's so many politics because like I imagine the dream was to get the record deal, right? I mean, that was kind of,
Right, right. Somehow we were always paranoid that we were getting screwed.
yeah.
Uh, at least our manager was, and
And you probably were.
probably were. Yeah. So because you read about so many of the musicians back then got stuck in these bad record deals that held them back and dictated their. I mentioned the Lemon Pipers. They were not a bubblegum band, but yet they were forced to release Green Tambourine, and which was the king of bubblegum hits
Yeah.
back then. And that was an example where the record company changed their musical style
Yeah.
for will. So that happened all the time, and many of them were monetarily screwed, and so we were always very paranoid about that. And I think we turned down at least 3 or 4 contracts.
Yeah.
So, but as a consequence, we never got anything out. So
And so at what point in this whole story did medicine start to be an idea or a path, when did that
Well,
start to germinate?
my father was a physician, but that kind of, had the opposite effect on me. I never really wanted to be a physician. I never planned to do it. Um, I left my parents around that time that I had dropped out, and probably didn't see them for a year and a half, maybe or so at a time. When I came back from New York, I had a series of apartments in Wallen Hills and Clifton. And Linda, my girlfriend back then, now my wife, sort of saved me. We ended up getting married and having a baby as teenagers, and I finished high school. She drove me to Hughes Night School actually every night to get the credits I needed, and signed up for 1 quarter at UC and didn't go. I wasn't completely rehabilitated, and they all turned into Fs. But one day I was hitchhiking around looking for a job, and somebody picked me up who was going to the civil service office. And so I went along and applied and got a job at the old General Hospital as an orderly, and then got transferred into psychiatry, and I loved it, and kind of changed my whole outlook on outside of marriage and family, my life. And so I thought, well, I've got to do something with this. So I went back to evening college, still working full time, and met my mentor back then, Joel Warm, a psychologist who took me under his wing. We did some research, actually published together, and I academically did great. And so one day I thought, well, why do psychology if I can do psychiatry? So I went to the medical school and talked to the dean of admissions, who said, don't bother. You've got this, quarter of Fs that's going to, always hold down your GPA. And we don't even consider evening college a real school. You'll lose all that. Don't even bother. And I thought, well, I am going to bother. And so I day school and did all the pre-med stuff and worked at night, still full time, and ended up with the same GPA and test scores that all the other applicants had, except I had this different life experience that I think probably worked in my favor.
Yeah.
And they looked at it as something that differentiated me from everybody else. So I got in, and once I was no longer working on the psychiatric ward, I thought, well, why did I want to go into psychiatry? I don't want to do that. And as I went through my training, it seemed like all the icons and the stars were hem-onc people, including Phil Lemming, who you interviewed earlier. He was chief resident when I was an intern, and
Oh, wow.
and is also hematology and oncology, and so is all the great people around the university were. So I ended up, as well as the brother of Dick Vilter, Carl Vilter, who also took me under his wing. He had a practice at Trice Hospital, and outside of the formal rotations, he had me, seeing consults for him, and so HEMOC became, my first love and what I went into. So that's how that went. That's how I got into medicine. So,
And where was music during this whole transition? Were you still
well,
playing, or would you put it down?
it kind of disappeared. So as I picked it back up when my son, my youngest son actually was old enough to want to play drums. I think he was 12, and Linda got me a guitar for Christmas. I had been, without equipment. I should mention one of my guitar was stolen out of our truck way back in the
Oh, wow.
60s. That Seymour Duncan, who's famous for pickups now, had been a fan of our band and actually hand wired my guitar for better sustain for those psychedelic feedback things, and so it was a great loss. And I never got another guitar after that. I just borrowed guitars when I was trying to get other groups together, shortly after that, and then just kind of gave it up during schooling and training. But when OHC was firmly established and expanding, we discovered we had enough people to start a group, enough musicians in the group. I'm gonna try to get out of the sunlight here if I can. We started the 5 FUs, which is the name of a chemotherapy drug, but also obviously a sort of a play on words. And, you know, I think that was, you know, it actually was an important part of my practice too, and our practice overall, for a number of reasons. One, the most obvious is that we had a CD that we sold, and we play all these benefits, and ended up probably donating between $200,000 and $300,000 to
Oh, wow.
local cancer charities from the things we did. But you know, I think secondly, it gave us something outside medicine as an outlet.
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of things we know prevent burnout. And again, I wasn't close, but you know, maybe that helped. I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
And you know, I think it actually helped patient relationships. So it kind of humanizes the doctor if they know that you know, that they're actually a real person out there playing music, you know, in a nightclub on Friday night, and gave us kind of a guaranteed audience because all our patients, you know, loved it, and a lot of them came and became our fan club, and gave us a kind of a guaranteed, you know, audience wherever we played.
Yeah.
But we actually had, you know, a few more people than just our patients come. So,
Yeah,
but
and it was on our end, kind of on the flip side, it was such a big inspiration for me, and for us starting Musicians for Health, because once I got out of, you know, I went to boarding arts high school, I went to multiple, you know, jazz music colleges, universities, and through, and 8 years later, you know, here I am with all of these music credentials. Um, and I just wasn't exactly sure, like, what now, or like why does this matter? You know, like, I always loved music, but then by the time I was old enough to actually have graduated, I was like, how can this be beneficial to someone else? It's so easy to let it be so narcissistic. And so seeing talking to you and seeing the 5FUs, and also being able to do rounds with you and really start that first programmatic piece of Unexpected Journey really helped be able to understand the power of music and art, for awareness, for fundraising, for being able to make all of these connections. So like you were talking about at the beginning of this conversation, all of the things that are easy to overlook because they're not really quantizable, you know, but really make a huge difference um, for how happy a patient is, for how, you know, just the experience for their life, for being able to humanize them too. Because I feel like on both sides, from the little bit that I've seen in the medical field, it's so easy for both patients and doctors to become inhuman, you know, to lose their name and just become a patient or a doctor. And so to let on both sides it be this more organic, that we're here trying to help, we're trying to heal you, we're trying to make, you know, that the point is to grow and get better.
it also added a little humor to a bad situation of having cancer. We had songs like "Give Me Some Chemo" and things that
Mm-hmm.
made fun of the whole experience, and they loved it. You know, I think it really, you know, kind of helped them to, you know, step back every once in a while and look at cancer from a different perspective. And in fact, a lot of our patients, you know, several of them, you know, actually set up some of the benefits that we played with, and did unbelievably phenomenal jobs of you know, setting up silent auctions and donations. And one of them had the bone marrow donor registry there, you know, signing up people. In fact, several of them actually did, and some of the nurses did too. Set up some of the, you know, something called Night for Fright every year. The Jewish hospital nurses did. The Christ Hospital residents who worked with me set up what they called Breast Fest, which was an annual thing every year for 3 or 4 years maybe, where they, you know, we as members of OHC couldn't really ethically accept any donations or input from the pharma industry, but the residents could. So they got them to give big dollars for, you know, to support and to cover all the costs and that sort of thing. And so all the
Yeah.
earnings with, the admission charge and, silent auctions and so forth,
It,
all
it
went to the cancer charity. So,
it gets so much to. It reminds me of Dr. Lemming and I talking about um, like really like pre-civilization and like the beginnings of medicine and the beginnings of music, how both of them, have really been around for so long, for like pre-language arguably, and how it's always been this center of community, right? Like what I'm hearing is like music is like such a strong platform to be able to engage community, to be able to incite all of this change, and sometimes to be able to change within itself, but a lot of times to be a catalyst, to be able to get all of these groups together and engaged and excited and full of energy to go do something.
yeah, exactly. And of course, we know that there's music therapy that's been shown to be beneficial. You're kind of doing it in a different way and providing music as a way of almost treatment experience for people, but especially people who've had cancer to kind of experience different emotions through music,
Yeah.
which we all do. I think music really elicits, whether you're a musician or not, it elicits emotions that can help clarify your life, in different ways. And you've been great at doing that. So
Thank you. Yeah.
we'll,
And I have also,
we'll appreciate that. So
yeah. And I forget if I
what
told you, but
benefit you do. So
I've been exploring more traditional music therapy too. I did the NYU summer intensive this year too, and I think that I might slowly be making the transition into being a little more um, me- professionally, medically transitioned to,
yeah.
or whatever the proper term is. Um, because I really love it, and I feel like now is a time that holistic medicine is really becoming much more prevalent and taken a lot more seriously. And
Mhm.
music therapy is becoming a lot more accepted in a lot of different ways. For so long, I feel like it was very stringent and kind of like this one thing. And now the open-mindedness of, I did the Nordoff Robbins therapy class at NYU, which is very improv based and very kind of where we both come from, of like less about this structure and and more about the psychedelic, it's basically a psychedelic experience in ways.
Yeah.
Just
Mhm.
exploring
Right. Mhm.
sound and movement and letting that really engage in through all of the treatment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a very, and I mentioned some of those things that we don't know why they improve survival, like being married and having a dog and that sort of thing. And certainly music is probably one of those things. All those things are very hard to do randomized trials on and do
Mhm.
studies on, but at least there hasn't been. Research money in oncology has unfortunately been, uh, in a shortfall, over the last few decades and politicized in ways. And so, people don't want to spend money to do research on something that isn't going to make money for somebody else.
Yeah.
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 But,
But it's pretty hard to debate. I
yeah,
think throughout the community in general that, quality of life is so important for healing.
exactly.
And that looks different for everybody,
Mhm.
but I think of music is a common thread to be able to enrich people's lives and improve quality of life.
And those are the kinds of things that improve survival. I mean, there are a few things that we do have proof for, like the things I mentioned.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think music is, if somebody were to study that, which would be a great thing to do,
Yeah.
that would be the case. So
Well, Dr. Hawley, Doug, thank you so much for being with us again. And
sure, really, my pleasure. So my pleasure. Thank you.
yeah,
Thank
and I'm
you.
so excited for this all to wrap up and us to be able. It's been a while since we've played some music together, and so
That would
I'm
be great. Yeah,
very excited to play some.
that would be great. So,
Thank you again, and
okay.
I'll see you soon.